sometimes it turns off after an hour. So we're fine now.
Okay.
And we're good to go whenever.
All right. All right, well, thank you everybody for coming both in person and online. So this is our final CHS innovation talk for the semester. So thank you for attending. We were just noting that I'm sure many of you are finishing up your grading and finishing up classes and all of that. So thanks for taking a moment to listen to this great talk. So it's my pleasure to introduce Matt Huntelman. Matt is a professor and division director of neurogenomics at TGen. He received his PhD from the University of Florida Department of Physiology and Functional Genomics, go Gators, at the McKnight Brain Institute. I'll just note that half of the people in the room currently are graduates of the University of Florida. Yeah, unless Marisa.
No, I just skewed your,
No, I included you in the numbers.
We're gonna hand out the lyrics to the fight song. Halfway through, we're gonna also.
Yeah. So Dr. Huntelman's research interests center around the investigation of omics, genomics, transcriptomics, and proteomics of neurological traits and disease. And his lab's overarching goal is to leverage findings in these disciplines to better understand, diagnose, and treat human diseases of the nervous system. And you can see we've got a really great and very relevant topic to our group. And all the types of ways that we're integrating technology and other things into the work that we're doing. So with that, I will pass it over to Matt for this great talk. Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thanks. So everybody can hear me fine, just talking here. Okay, great. All right, yeah, I appreciate the introduction. It was really fun to talk even for a little bit about some of the new directions where you guys are heading, which are extremely relevant to my interest areas. So it's going to be fun to work together in the coming years. So we're going to talk about neuroscience in your neighborhood. And first, I'll just go through a few slides. Number one, thank my laboratory team. These are all my team members here. And they obviously do all the hard work. I get to do the fun stuff.
Looks like a band cover.
Yeah, we were going for that. We were trying to look like a rock band. One of the alleys over here has some great spray paint art if anybody wants to replicate this picture. Also recognize my collaborators, both long and short term. Lee Ryan and Betty Gliski at the University of Arizona, Carol Barnes, Meredith Hay, and Robbie Brinton, also at University of Arizona, Sydney Schaefer at ASU, Candace Lewis at ASU, and Sean Dione of the Gates Foundation in Seattle. All of them contributed in some way to what I'll talk about today. And lastly, funding supports. So obviously it doesn't happen without the contributions of folks on this slide, including Mike Mueller and the Mueller Family Charitable Trust, who helped us start MindCrowd, which will be the main topic we talk about today. But also Flynn Foundation, TGen itself, University of Arizona as well. And recently the NIH/NIA support has been hugely important to what we do. So I appreciate that. And lastly, nothing financially to disclose about today's topic. All right, let's do it. So I'm going to start off really just by giving you guys a sense of what I think is important and what I tend to focus on in my thinking about research, just as a way for you to get to know me. So we'll go through a few of these just as an introduction to me, I think, but also to frame up what we're going to talk about. So number one is the replication crisis. Many of you may have heard about this. There are a couple great papers here that I'm referencing. But this refers to the fact that we have a hard time in biology in general, but also very strongly in genetics, psychology, and imaging for replicating findings. And that's primarily because of the sample sizes that we use. They tend to be too small, and the effect sizes that we report tend to be larger than they really are. And so when our colleagues come along and try and replicate our findings, they do a study the same size, and they end up not replicating. Is that true? You know, is that real life? Or is that because we are hovering around that significance level of 0.5 and then they end up not being able to report a replication? I think is a really important question for us to grapple with. So my push for larger studies is really rooted in this replication crisis problem. Diversity and representation, even moving beyond race and ethnicity, really matters to me. And focusing on science that is diverse and representative of groups who are understudied and underserved is really important to me. So I'm going to hit you with data right off the start here. So this is actually MindCrowd results showing you the number of people. This is just for the last 2 years, the ends, but the percentages are for all of MindCrowd. So these are ends for the last 2 years, but across a series of categories that I consider to be underserved categories. And if you add all of these up, around 80% of the MindCrowd cohort is underrepresented. So we think that's really significant, and I'll tell you more about MindCrowd here in the coming slides. But I'm very, very proud of this ability of MindCrowd to reach those underserved groups. And one of those is rural. So here's a glimpse into some of our rural participants. Around 10% of MindCrowd is rural. And in this graph, they are represented by blue dots, where the pink dots are people who reside in urban zip codes. So just giving you guys a visualization of the MindCrowd cohort in the United States, which is over 400,000 participants now. This is also really important because I'm interested in Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. And people who live in rural zip codes are at higher risk for dementia in general. Yet they remain extremely understudied. Okay, how do you study the brain? It's only natural for us to focus on people who have disease or illness. My lab does a lot of that work as well. We focus on Alzheimer's disease patients, for example. However, I believe very strongly that when it comes to the brain, which is still one of the most enigmatic organs in our body, why should we start with the broken brain or the sick brain? And so I really think there's a lot for us to be learned by studying healthy people. And the reason I show this car is usually I get people to think back to their childhood. You know, if you wanted to be a car mechanic, usually you took apart a perfectly functioning car and learned how it worked and tried to put it back together, or a perfectly functioning toy, for example. You didn't start with a broken toy and try and infer what it looked like when it was perfect. So I'm a big believer that we have to study the healthy brain to understand the broken brain. A couple more for you guys. I think that we can see very clearly that disease prevention is really critical for human health, and it's especially important for the brain, as well as for other organs that can kind of hide disease for long periods of time. By the time you receive that Alzheimer's disease diagnosis, for example, we know 70% of your hippocampal neurons are dead. That means your brain has been hiding that deficiency for a very long time, usually about 20 years. And it's been functioning just fine with about 70% of cell death. And then finally, it's just too much. And you start to experience those symptoms that are recognizable as Alzheimer's disease. So, you know, trying to understand which of those lines I'm on matters to me. Am I on, you know, the 2 lines that are I'm gonna live just as long as the other lines, but I'm gonna remain without dementia, or am I on the other 2 lines? And I don't know where I'm at today. And that's, I think, an important piece that's missing from medicine and how we approach the brain. Okay, sorry, I hit a button and now I've covered up my titles. So along with that comes this question: when was your brain last tested? I don't know if you guys have thought about this much, but I think about it a lot. I've never had an official clinical memory test. It's very likely that most of you haven't either, but I certainly have had 15 annual cholesterol exams. I've been screening for prostate cancer. I've had colon cancer screening, right? My heart's been checked, my eyes have been checked, my ears have been checked. There's a lot of tests that we have happen to us as part of our routine medical care that are initiated simply because of our sex or our age, for example. But none of those involve the brain. And it's kind of strange, right? Until you realize that, sorry, Gary, I screwed something up, but I got it. Until you realize that, of course, this is the reason, right? There's no real good medicine. So if I find a problem with my brain early, there's not a solution. So both the doctor and the patient are frustrated. And of course, that's why cholesterol screening is great, because there's great solutions, both drug-based and diet-based, lifestyle-based, for example. We have to get past this though, because we're losing the battle against Alzheimer's disease. We have to grow comfortable with testing our brains even when there isn't a perfect solution.
You can hit the arrow with the green bar.
More. Yeah, hide.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, guys, I'll try not to do that again. Okay, so not for this group, you guys know all of this, but for most groups, when I talk to the lay public, this is the real focus. What can I do, right? You're this guy who studies the brain forever. What can I do to help protect my brain? And we all know this list. And in fact, this is just a bit of it, right? It's even longer. You guys know all of these things. But that's exhausting, and none of us has the time to do each one of these every day. So a lot of our work is focused on, Okay, a lot of our work is focused on this new concept called precision aging. I think this is my last sort of introductory slide for you guys. What is precision aging? Well, precision aging is using the approaches of precision medicine, which are typically used for oncology, and applying those to the aging brain. So basically, could I reorder that list, this list here, to help you know what your number one thing you could do to help your aging brain was? And we expect these are going to be different for each of us. Maybe sleep matters to me more than exercise. And so that would be at the top of my list. But as you guys know, with precision medicine and cancer, we use the cancer genomics, and we have the cancer tell us, what drug should I use to beat you? So the typical approach for breast cancer in the past was, well, you get this medicine first. When you fail it, you get this medicine. When you fail that, you get this medicine. And nowadays, the modern approach to something like breast cancer is to study the molecules of the breast cancer and use the best possible anti-cancer treatment that's available for what the cancer is showing us its Achilles heel is. And sometimes that's not even a breast cancer medicine. That might be a lung cancer treatment, for example, or a liver cancer treatment. So we want to use that for aging and brain aging, but we're in the very early stages. I always tell people that I think neurology is about 20 years behind oncology. So I'm excited because I think we're in the early stages and we get to be a part of that, but I think it's a much longer term goal. All right. Take a breath here and let's talk about MindCrowd. So our solution to many of these problems that I just laid out is to have our academic study live on the internet. So this is our homepage. You're all welcome to join. I won't be telling you too much today that could bias your results, so you actually could be a valid participant. Please take the time if you want to visit us at mindcrowd.org. It takes about 10 minutes. And this is what it looks like on the back end. A little bit complicated, but not too bad. All I want you to really focus on is the fact that MindCrowd includes, really in the bright purple, about a 10-minute experience where we collect some demographic information. You sign electronic consent form. We collect some demographic information. You perform 2 cognitive tasks. One's a processing speed task, SVRT. The other one is a verbal memory task called paired associates. We collect some additional demographic information, maybe things that maybe are a little more anxiety provoking. So we're collecting them after the cognitive tasks. And then we ask you if you want to tell us who you are. That's Want More MindCrowd. On that page, you can tell us your name and email. We can invite you to other studies. And then at the very end, we show you your results. This is the basic layout of the site that we've had for about 11 years. So we were one of the first, the early adopters of sharing research results back with participants, and we do it in real time. They get to see how they performed on the memory test right away. But we also have surveys and additional tests that we'll talk a little bit about as well. So the MindCrowd cohort, obviously, since it doesn't require a laboratory visit, can be essentially worldwide without walls. And we've seen participants join us from over 150 countries. Of course, one of the problems here is what languages is it available in. And you can see it dominates with the English-speaking areas of the world. And so we do have the site fully in English, but it's also available fully in Spanish. So the full experience can be done in Spanish as well. And we have found that about 10% of our participants every day join us in Spanish. You can do fun things when you have big data like this. That is a map of the US, but not overlaid on map coordinates. This is just longitude and latitude scatter plot of participants. So we're just letting the data draw the United States, but you also have local MindCrowd cohorts, and I've zoomed in on Tucson, Arizona there to show you that we can recruit from these people for additional studies that might happen face-to-face in Tucson, for example, at the University of Arizona.
Are those based on IP addresses?
Yeah, these are IP address based. So with all the caveats of IP location. Okay, so what does recruitment look like? So it's actually pretty striking to live on the internet with your research. We recruit 300 new participants every single day. We are zeroing in on 500,000 total participants right now. And in the middle, I'm showing you the differences between before NIH funding and after NIH funding. So the blue part of this started after we received an NIH grant to support MindCrowd, and we were able to double our monthly recruitment into MindCrowd. So we recruit about 8,000 people a month into MindCrowd. The number that I watch, which is kind of fun, is T1 million. So how long is it going to take us to reach 1 million participants? And right now, that's June of 2029 when we'll reach 1 million. So that's a number that we keep track of just because it's fun. And that changes based on our recruiting slopes. Okay, so let's go through some of the demographics because a lot of people have presumptions about internet-based research, and I'm here to help those die really, really hard. First is the age plot. As you can see, the peak of age for participants is 65 years of age. So this is not a young cohort. 75% of our cohort is aged 50 and older. Okay, so that's the first thing that usually surprises people. Educational attainment is in the middle. It's not too important to focus on these, but I'll give you guys the snippet that matters. 25% of our participants have a high school education, high school diploma or less. So it's not high education. It does skew a little higher, but there's a good representation of folks who are who don't have those advanced degrees. On the right side, I'm showing male, female, and intersex participants. Intersex is really hard to see because it's very small, less than 1%. But you can also see that the male participants are most represented at the younger ages. So this is very typical for academic research. We are about 1/3 male and 2/3 female. But you can see at ages 35 and less, approximately, we're almost 50-50, which is where we should be if we were perfect, right? So that's kind of interesting. These might be a bit hard to see for you guys here in the room, but I'll walk through them briefly for you. I'm looking at 6 other demographics. In the upper left is first-degree family history of Alzheimer's disease. So we explain what that means to people and we tell them, do you have this in your family? And that peak you can see is right around 60 to 65. That makes a whole lot of sense for first-degree relatives. Jump over to the right side there, that is second-degree relatives. And you can see that peak is in the 40s. So these are people who are endorsing aunts and uncles being diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, for example. In the middle there is heart disease, showing that gradual increase with age. Bottom left is hypertension, showing that increase with age. almost to 50% of the MindCrowd cohort reports hypertension once you get out to age 70 and above. The middle one there is just for fun to show you guys that this is representative when it comes to handedness. So left-handed is in green. It's about 10% of the cohort until you get to those older ages. We know that that's true. There are less left-handed people who are 80 and above. And in the lower right is the Hispanic Latino percentage. So you can see that is really following almost what we would predict based on the US immigration patterns, where we're around 20 to 25% in people who are under the age of 50, and then it slopes down to those lower values over age 50.
Good question about the sex distribution on the prior slide.
Absolutely.
Is that because of, I assume that the NIH effect was through the social media places that you're advertising?
Right. Yeah.
So could that be because those tend to be sites that may be more widely read by women than men, or is that something
No.
we know about internet users or study
No, this is something
participants,
we
or?
know about science study participants.
Oh,
Women
interesting.
are much more altruistic with their time, and yeah, this holds up across in-person research. Unless you're studying something that's male specific, you end up with about 2/3 women, 1/3 men. Yeah. So how we budge that, how we change that with strategies,
Mhm.
social media-based recruitment strategies, for example, that's the fun part, is how we can engage more men to shift these numbers to where it should be. That's a really great and fun topic. It takes up a lot of my time,
Yeah.
thinking about it and doing it. So yeah, great question. Last one I'll leave you guys with for demographics, looking at SES. Take home message here is that around 15%, 15 to 16% of MindCrowd participants, 30 and older. So I didn't want this to be biased by school years or anything. So 30 and older, around 15% have a total household income of under 35,000 or less. So I think that's pretty stellar. I'm pretty happy with that. So these are not, yes, we do skew to be, you know, higher SES, but we also have a good representation with lower SES. Okay, so let's go through some fun results from the test so you guys can see what we see. So first, let's start with what we call attention. This is what we call it to the public because we decided not to call it processing speed. That just doesn't sound very, you know, normal. But this is a processing speed task. It's simple visual reaction time. See the ball, hit the button. That's all it is. I love this task because there's really no strategy. So it's kind of fun. It takes the strategy out of it. Unless you're just going to mash on the keyboard. We have ways to kick people out who do that. But I love this because it measures, you know, the connection, the neural connections between your eyes, your brain, and the muscles in your finger to react to the ping ball. So here are the results for the quality control data across ages. We cut it off at 85 here just because the numbers get a little bit smaller over 85. But this needs an update as well. But the take-home message is the same. You guys can see that processing speed gets slower with age. That's well known. What I hope you can appreciate is just that beautiful variation, right? This is normal variation in the population, showing this, you know, the ends being, you know, from in the 250s all the way up to in the 650s and even higher for this, which is really quite interesting. And here are the basic statistical results. So I'm not gonna go through all the statistical approach here because it is 100% simple vanilla statistics. This is regression stats. When you have 500,000 people, regression tends to be very, very robust and a very simple way to approach this. And that's what I'm showing you here. What I want you to realize is that age affects, so on top in white are the aspects that are significant. So age, education, self-report of brain disease, and that is as generic as you guys are imagining. We just said, do you have brain disease? If you're a male, if you have a history of stroke, if you are a smoker, and if you take daily prescription medicines, there's an effect if you take more than 0. So any prescription medicine changes your reaction time. The interesting thing there is that the daily medications have an additive effect. I won't show you guys that, but if you take 1, 2, 3, and 4, you get slower and slower on this task. Men are actually faster, so that's what the minus 54 milliseconds means. Men are faster at this task at every single age. And I don't have the plot for that, but that's actually really quite interesting. And there have been previous studies looking at non-experts as well as experts at this task. So what I would consider experts would be like track and field athletes who have to hear something and then get off the blocks as quick as they can. It's interesting because there are sex differences for that. And it's about 25 milliseconds.
So there's a couple there that seem like they're going in the opposite direction,
Yeah,
like cancer, drug abuse,
right.
hypertension.
Exactly.
seizures.
Yeah, exactly.
Any thoughts on that? I mean,
Yeah, I think we need more data, actually. I'll show you a bit about that. So the next task is a medial temporal lobe task. Sorry about the typo there. This is the verbal paired associates task. This is an important type of memory, as you guys know. And this is affected very early in Alzheimer's disease, really dependent on your hippocampus, entorhinal cortex, and perirhinal cortex function. So this task is called paired associate learning. The thing I love about this is that it's over 100 years old. So we don't develop new cool cognitive tasks in MindCrowd. I like to use the ones that are time tested. We know what brain regions are required to perform them. We know some of what we should expect. And this is one of those, developed by one of the first psychologists, Mary Whitten Calkins, all the way back in 1894. So pretty cool test. And here are the results. As before, you can see with your mind's eye that slow drop in performance. So in this case, 36 is a perfect score. This is 3 rounds of 12 word pairs. 36 is a perfect score and 0 is the worst. And you can see the gradual slope decreasing in performance with age, but also you can see just that incredible variability across the cohort, right? Some may call it noise. I think that is a representation of how complex human beings are. This is very likely just a true representation of performance. Is this working? So I showed you the SVRT, or I talked to you about the SVRT changes with age. There's the trend there on the left. The one right next to it is the paired associates trend. You can see it goes from about 24 in the 18-year-olds down to about half that in the 80-year-olds. So 24 to 12 is the trend line there. There's the differences in performance for men and women on the paired associates. Women are better at this task at every single age. So verbal memory is a strength of the female brain. And we see that from start to finish, 18-year-olds on up through 100-year-olds in this case. And education has a significant predictor effect on this, where it's stepwise improvement in performance with more education. So we control for all of these when we analyze the other variables. And here's that table. You can see there's the male value, about 2 word pairs. Just to remind you guys, this is out of 36. So 2 word pairs out of 36 is a pretty large effect. Brain disease, daily medications, family history of Alzheimer's disease is an interesting one. I'm not going to talk about that today, but this is if you just endorsed having a 1st-degree relative with Alzheimer's disease. This is not about you, this is about your relatives. You perform worse on this task compared to your peers. About half a word pair worse on this task. Smoking, we'll get into smoking in a little bit, and you can read through the rest of the list. So a lot of variables having a significant impact. But what I want to emphasize is when you get to studies this large, you really need to focus on the effect size, because finding significance tends to be quite easy, even with small effect sizes. So Should we be concerned about 1/3 of a word pair out of 36? You know, I don't know. But it is fun to actually start to understand which factors are associated and really think about how important that effect size is.
And these are multivariate results, right? So
Yes.
that's controlling for everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so to your question about seemingly results that may not make sense, where you see a benefit of something you would consider to be negative. Let me show you guys, which I think is some cool data. We need to refresh this. We haven't refreshed this since 2023, but this is showing you as if we stopped MindCrowd every day and pretended that was the end of the study and you know, did the statistical analysis and then moved over one day and redid it. Okay, so we wrote this ridiculous computational loop and slid across the entire study. And these are the curves. So these are things that are known predictors of paired associate performance. You can see education, each milestone having a positive effect, age in red, sex, male in purple, and then brain disease in green, self-declared brain disease. So what I'm showing on the left side is the effect size. You can see how these settle down, and those effect sizes have been solid for years. I mean, years, right? Now almost 10 years, those effect sizes haven't changed much. But then look at the p-values. You can see the p-values going up as well, right? So these aren't super interesting, but here, take a look at the next ones, which are some of the more exploratory ones and some of the ones that were popping out, you know, before: cancer, diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, seizures, and stroke. So you can see, look, these effect sizes, they're not super stable. They're still oscillating, whereas the p-values do creep up, but every now and then you'll see a spike. And so, you know, if we had stopped the study there, we would have reported on that p-value for heart disease and said heart disease is significant. And then, you know, a month later, it would be non-significant. But you can see now it's crept back up to be significant most recently. So I know we all know this is happening in our studies, but it's pretty fun to see it using big data where you just downsample it, right? It's also a little bit concerning, but I also think this is what underlies some of that replication crisis. When did you stop your study, and did you get lucky to find that significant effect on the day when you stopped your study? So I'm always fascinated by these plots. It would take a long time to fully dissect these, but they're kind of neat to see. Okay, and let me show it to you visually, just because this is kind of fun too. So this is our education data across all of MindCrowd, and I'm going to build it from day one for you in a video. So on the left side is the paired associate performance. Same as before, the top of the graph is the better performance, the bottom is going to be 0. And then I'm going to show you it by sex, so women on the left, men on the right. And this is different levels of educational attainment. We have 5 different levels of educational attainment, and you're going to see the curves for each one of these grow. Across the top, you're going to see the total just increase, okay? So it's just going to be like an animation, just getting larger and larger across the top, and we'll count up for you guys. So here we go. There we go. So you can see the ends increasing and the lines with the confidence intervals sort of settling down. But now we're already up to like 18,000 women on the left side. So these are kind of neat as well. It's like taking that static plot I showed you before, but showing you how it really evolves over time. This is a very stable effect. We have videos of other effects where it's just really jumping all over the place. I should probably show one of those after this one, because education tends to be a very stable effect because it's one of the known predictors for this, but it's kind of neat to see it, you know, move around. And obviously we stopped this along. We haven't made an updated video because our numbers are much higher than that.
Are you going to use this to reverse engineer a type of power calculation?
Yeah, that's exactly what we want to do. And when we publish papers, we like to say, to replicate our effect based on our effect size, and you know, you should do a study of this size. Yeah, great point. Yeah. Okay, let me do a time check here. Let me just walk you through an example with smoking. Because a lot of people have questions about how do we know people aren't lying to us and things like that. This gives you a nice example of how we handle that, I think. Okay, so this is the main effect of self-reporting that you are a smoker on performance on the task. Smokers in blue, non-smokers in gold, they perform worse on average across the entire aging spectrum. Okay, so there's a main effect of smoking. And then we asked if there was a difference between the sexes, and it turns out that women smokers are the ones primarily driving this main effect. They perform much worse. And in fact, the male effect of smoking on performance is currently not significant, not statistically significant. Okay, that doesn't mean it's okay, guys, if you go out and smoke, obviously. But this effect is largely present only in women. So,
Are you controlling for anything else there? Because smoking is highly correlated with severe mental illness and alcohol use.
we don't have data about alcohol use and mental illness, but I mean, these are such large numbers. I doubt it's driven by that. We're controlling for every other variable we collect.
I would imagine alcohol use would be,
More prevalent or less prevalent in women?
oh, I would think more prevalent than smoking now, maybe in older cohorts. I don't know that for sure. But I would think that would be something that would, oh, this is the word here, but something that would slow down the cognitive response.
Yeah.
Smoking puzzles me.
Yeah, it's great, huh? Okay, so one thing we can do is propensity score matching really quite easily with this cohort because it's so large. So these are people who are perfectly matched for their answers to all the demographic questions. And when you do that, you see that it's, again, only present in women. The male effect of smoking is not significant in this example. So that's some of the fun things here. So regression tries to do this, but by using propensity score matching, you can match up people exactly according to their demographics. So the only difference here would be smoking or non-smoking. And then we also get questions a lot about self-report error or people who are not being honest about their smoking status. And so the way we do that is we basically introduce synthetic error into our data sets and then recompute everything 10,000 times, introduce more error and do it again and again, and report the p-values as box plots. And the take-home message is pretty simple. It would require almost a 10% self-report error to explain away this smoking effect. So if you think 10% of people are lying to me about their smoking status, then it could be due to self-report error, but it would have to be pretty systematic. So I don't believe that's the case.
Question on
Yeah.
the previous slide.
Yeah.
So when you said about the smoking, are you looking at yes and no, or even the number of cigarettes smoked? Or...
We are not doing pack year calculations or anything like that. This is a simple yes, no.
Hi, Hugh.
How we doing?
Okay, how are you?
Because I would imagine maybe that might differ with the frequency of use as well.
Absolutely. I think that is something that I would love to have, but we tried to keep it simple. So this is just a simple endorsement of, do you consider yourself to be a smoker? Yeah, it's a really great point, and it's definitely that's the rigorous requirement for the field who wants to study smoking, is to calculate pack years based on essentially how many cigarettes you smoke a day. But we don't do that here. And the other thing we do is permutation testing to try to convince people that this is not due to chance. This is kind of boring in a large cohort size, but I really encourage folks to consider this if they're in smaller cohorts. And basically what you do is you shuffle data labels, you redo the analysis, and then you end up with a histogram of T statistics, and you can see where if those overlap with your finding or not. And in all cases, they don't, except for in men. And remember, men was men smoking. The effect of smoking in men was the non-significant result. So that's what we see here. So we do a lot of that to ensure the quality of our data, just because it is an internet-based study and we can't guarantee everything. We also do collect DNA from folks. So I'm a geneticist and it'd be a shame to do this huge study without getting DNA. And we get DNA through the mail using dried blood. I'm gonna skip past that DNA result just for time. Okay, so the last thing I want to tell you about, just with a few slides, is our mobile laboratory study. So this is the next extension of MindCrowd. We've only been doing this for 6 months, and we call this Mobile Minds. It includes this trailer, which actually is sitting behind Tijan this week. If you guys, park over there, you can stick your head around and check it out. It's a car trailer, custom car trailer with 2 rooms. The front room is a really small wet laboratory where we can process blood samples. And in the back room is a brain imaging suite that includes that low field MRI that I'm showing there. That's about the size of it compared to the trailer. And it's a 0.06 Tesla MRI. So very low field. The fringe field, the 5 Gauss field, which is the dangerous magnetic field, if you will, you can think of it that way. It's the size of a hula hoop. So it does not even extend beyond the edges of the trailer. In fact, we don't have any precautions to even walk in the room with this MRI. You walk in with your phones, your jewelry, all that stuff. So it's a very safe MRI that's low field. So it takes bad pictures, but it plugs into the wall. So this runs on wall power. There's no liquid helium. There's no superconducting magnets. It takes about the same power as your morning coffee maker to take an image of a brain. So that is a game changer. I don't care if it takes bad pictures. And there's another reason why I don't care is because they're processed into good pictures using AI. So this is the same brain scan in the low field and then morphed with the AI. And then we've published on this, comparing the exact same person imaged in the low field and the 1.5T or 3T magnets. The brain volumes correlate over 0.99. So this does an incredible job at brain volumes. Yes, it cannot do all the other fancy stuff that a high field, high strength MRI can do, but the high field, high strength MRI can't fit in the back of a trailer either. So that's really important because we've taken this on the road. Here's a shot of us in Wickenburg. You guys know about, I don't know, an hour or so, hour, 15 minutes away. Most of the people we saw in Wickenburg have never had an MRI before. Or participated in research. So bringing the laboratory to them is actually really powerful and it's going to help us understand rural Arizona during the coming year. We published a few things on this. I showed you the 3T versus low field, but we also published sort of a primer on how to build a mobile lab and how to combine it with MindCrowd. So these 3 publications are out there. The one where we combined with MindCrowd, we recruited and scanned 75 people in 3 weeks at the cost of about $15,000 between the ages of 18 and 94. So that is extremely, extremely powerful. Game changer in my opinion. So what I like to, why do I do this is because I think that you have to have this iterative model to do the absolute best study you can. I'm not saying your study can't be good without these, but I think that trying to incorporate these is actually makes it even more powerful. So the electronic MindCrowd based one, the mobile laboratory based, but also your in-person, gold standard measurements that you can make in your bricks and mortar laboratory are also obviously really important. And I just thought I'd leave you guys with some new data from the mobile lab. So I'll present a couple slides and I'll be finished. This is actual data from the mobile laboratory. We've now scanned around 425 people between the ages of 18 and 101. So we had a 101-year-old join us last week. She didn't make it into the data yet. So you can see it stops at 80 there. But last week we imaged a lot of people between the ages of 70 and 100. It was really quite amazing. And why can we do that? Because we can bring the laboratory to their assisted living facility. Okay, so upper left is the verbal memory score. That's MindCrowd paired associates, what I showed you guys before. And you can see it's replicating what we would expect, that decrease with age. And then there's the simple visual reactions under the processing speed measurements showing that slowing with age. We also do olfactory testing, and you can see an effective age on performance with the olfactory test, especially the people who are totally anosmic. Over the age of 60, they have no scent detection whatsoever. They scored 0 out of 16. We're interested in seeing if performance on olfaction correlates with cognition, which there's a lot of evidence that it might, and trying to do a larger study to sort of demonstrate that. Grip strength, a measure of frailty. So we perform this, it only takes a few minutes, and you can see really nice differences between men and women, which is well known, but also a drop in grip strength on average with age. So just trying to convince you guys that we're able to measure things accurately in the mobile laboratory. The last two are brain imaging results, showing you total gray volume there in the middle. There is a known male-female difference where men have more gray matter than women, and also that it should decline with age, and you can see that quite nicely. That's an easy thing to measure. That's a big volume, right? So I'm gonna also show you hippocampal volume. That's the one on the far lower right. That's hippocampal volume divided by your intracranial volume, showing that known decrease with age as well. These are all in healthy people who do not have dementia. This is well known, but it's really reassuring to see it in the mobile laboratory. We also collect blood, and as I mentioned, we process it right there on site, and we can do blood biomarker measurements. So we are measuring the known Alzheimer's disease biomarkers, as well as about 150 other ones in plasma. And I'm showing you guys some early results here where the neurofilament light chain biomarker in plasma is significantly correlated with age. That's actually known, as well as the IL-6 and CRP biomarkers correlating with body mass index. That's also known. So those are markers that correlate with general inflammation. And as BMI increases, you have an increased basal state of inflammation. You can see correlations with those biomarkers. So, you know, not perfect, but it's early days, and I'm excited to already see some of these showing some correlations. Last thing everybody asks is sort of by the numbers questions. So this is extremely labor intensive. When we are operating, when we're at a site, it's about 80 hours per person per week. You have to drive there, drive home, see participants. So my team is only on the road about 20 weeks a year with the lab. But we still see about 1,200 participants, about 60 a week. And when you do the math, that ends up being about $583 per participant. That's typically less than it costs to use one of the high field scanners. So you're getting low field and all the other stuff for about the cost of one high field scan. And then I'm just listing some of the things we measure there, which I didn't talk about. We do blood pressure, we do body composition using BIA. We get SNP profiles on everybody. And we also are adding in retinal scanning, which will be really fun. So we're looking at eyes and nose and brain, and soon we're going to add in ears too with a speech and noise task that I really would like to include. So as long as it's short, I'm very interested in including it in these visits. And then what I didn't tell you guys about is for participants, they get a $20 Amazon gift card, they get a drinking glass, but more importantly, they get this guy, which is a 3D print of their brain using their MRI data. So this is using their actual MRI data. It takes about 10 hours to print this. I'm showing you 30 seconds. We clean this up, we send it to them, and they can hold their brain in their hand using their actual MRI data. Yeah, I mean, this is the #1 reason people participate. Because your friends, they might have an Amazon gift card and they likely have a stainless steel drinking cup, but they do not have a 3D print of their brain. And so a lot of people get excited about that. I should have brought one with me for you guys. But you know, what I want you to think about when you're reflecting on this, maybe later today, these are the type of data that we need to start to catch up to oncology and start to do truly precision medicine for brain and brain disease. And so this is a huge challenge because it's not as simple as pointing to something that, pointing to a tumor and saying, that's bad, let's take it out and study it. We can't do that in neuroscience. We have a hard time even agreeing if plaques are bad and tangles are bad, right? They definitely shouldn't be there, but are they causing disease? We argue about that. And so this is going to be hard, and which means it's going to be a big data problem. So how we tackle that is really, really critical, and we should start now because we are behind cancer, which, I don't mean to say it like a bad thing. I'm just jealous. I want us to be up there where we can do what all my friends do for breast cancer patients and other cancer patients. I just want to be there. I'm jealous. I want to be 20 years in the future here. And so that's a big part of our focus. So I'll leave it there. Thanks, guys.
Still ahead of psychiatry.
Yeah, there's always someone we can look at.
All right, I think we do have about 6 minutes for questions, including any online. Gary, do you want them to unmute or do you want them to?
I've asked them to unmute themselves.
Okay, great. I'll start us off. So can you say more about just sort of the broad kind of recruitment strategy?
Yes.
Like what was your process and how has that changed over time?
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful question. And as you can imagine, we could have done an hour on recruiting strategies. So I'm happy to come back sometime and talk about recruitment, but we use a lot of different strategies and you have to treat it like it's a science experiment too. So you have to do something, dissect the data and decide if it was worth it. We spend about $2 per person that we recruit. So that's not a lot of money, which is actually really exciting. But once you realize I recruit 8,000 a month, my monthly bill is a lot. Most of that is spent on professionals. Okay, so scientists, we're smart. We have the PhD because we can train ourselves to do other things, right? Sometimes though, we shouldn't do that. And so I really recommend that when it comes to professionals, when it comes to social media, marketing, communications, yes, maybe we can get halfway there, but we're not going to be there at the professional level. So I pay a lot of people to do social media right, to post 80 posts a month. We post 80 times a month on Facebook, Twitter. That's a lot, right? I could not do that as my second job. We also explore kind of wild things. So anybody play games on their phone, and when you run out of money, you have to use real money. Or you can do something, right? These games usually say, well, instead of real money, you can, buy a shirt from the Gap and you get, $10 extra or whatever. We actually advertise on some of those. So you can join MindCrowd to get money for your smartphone games. We did that. We ran that campaign for one day. We recruited 2,000 people. The demographics of those people were so amazing. They were younger, so not surprisingly, that is a truth. They were primarily under 40, but Black African-American participants were 17% of that cohort. In MindCrowd, Black African-American right now are 6%. So we over-recruited Black African-American with this campaign by threefold, which was, I didn't expect that. I did not expect that at all. Hispanic Latino participation was about the same, for example. So this is one way that we were able to reach a group that we don't reach with our traditional approaches. So I can go on and on, man. But basically it's a mixture of approaches, but my take home message is rely on professionals, because the game of social media, social marketing, it is a profession. It is not just something you do as a side job.
And you're refining those strategies based on a certain demographics. So like if you want to make sure you're reaching African-American 18 to 22-year-olds, that will then refine into that. So over time, I'm presuming you are at different ways trying to be as representative as possible.
Exactly, that's our goal. Same with the questions about the male participants. Once we crack that, figure it out, we ride that for a little bit until we get our numbers up. But that's exactly right. we have a whole team who who designs code that analyzes recruitment. And it analyzes it every day. And then if we tickle a certain demographic above our standard, we flag that day. And then we review it and we say, what do we do on this day? What post brought us in these people, or what approach? So yeah, it's kind of like an iterative diagnostic approach to say, okay, well, this worked, let's try it again. Exactly as you're imagining. It's really hard to do that if you don't have some of the big numbers that we have. So when you get 300 a day, you can actually draw some inferences.
Do you get longitudinal data on these?
Yeah, great question. And that has been something we haven't done in the past, but the NIH funding supports that. And so now we are collecting longitudinal data. We launched that about 1.5 years ago. So some of the tests you can do every 3 months because there's not a huge practice effect. Some of the other tests, like the paired associates learning test, we have to wait for about 12 months for that to decay from your brain a little bit. And so it's kind of neat because you do different tests at different times, which helps with retention. So recruitment is one thing, but the other fun thing is retention. So I can tell you, hey, come back and play this game. You played it before. We'll show you how you did before. We'll show you how you did now. Can you come back and spend 3 minutes with us? So that's really helpful for retention because I leak out, new requests for these games at different times, which is fun.
I'm looking to expand it more globally. I know you shared your worldwide map, and
Yeah.
what are some of the strategies to enhance recruitment in some of the other countries, especially non-native English speaking?
Yeah. That is definitely our goal. It's really hard. As you guys know, so essentially we have a full IRB approved in English and a full IRB approved in Spanish. So basically it just doubles all your paperwork and all your tracking. That's not the reason not to do it. So we're working on that. And basically I would like to do the 5 most frequently spoken languages around the world. So, Hindi would be on that list. Spanish is on there, English is on there. I think Bengali might be on there.
Mandarin.
Yeah, Mandarin, Chinese. So we did have a Mandarin version of the site that we had launched before the NIH funding, and now we're trying to get that stood back up. So Mandarin is next, and then something from the Indian subcontinent, probably Hindi would also be next. Very complicated. For the Spanish, I spent a lot of money in translations, a lot of money in translation fees.
You may not need to do that anymore because a lot of web-based apps do that translation for you.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting though. Everybody argues over translations. Well, I would never say it that way. And then you get another opinion, I would never say it that way. So, yeah, you have to deal with some of that too. You have to sort of fight through that noise. But we're super interested in expanding this. I also realize it's not as simple as just taking a cognitive test and translating it to another language and expecting it to work perfectly. For example, what if one of our words is a fruit? Some of those don't even translate well to the United Kingdom, right? Would that even translate to the Indian subcontinent? Maybe they don't even have that fruit. So it's kind of, there are some psychology things that you also have to consider. But I still think we should collect the data and we can learn from it and then relaunch a new version if we need to.
Right, and even with the English site, I feel like to think of recruitment strategies for countries, let's say like India or other countries that speak English, and then collect data and see what type of data you're receiving if you're wanting to expand it at a larger level. Yeah,
I agree 100%. Science is very interested, and I'm very interested in bilingualism, trilingualism, and how that affects your cognitive performance. We have very clear data that bilingual participants on average score better than monolingual participants. So I want to collect more data from folks like that as well.
All right, well, thank you, Matt, really appreciate it. For those of you online, and have a great day.
Appreciate it.